high summer is a time when trying to head out and about, and the air conditioning you're going to find is something critical to your comfort, as especially when it's humid out. Even having the windows down isn't enough, especially when you get into the upper 80s. And what if your AC is blowing warm? And there's a couple things that I wanted to show you that you could try to check if you got AC blowing warm. First of all, you need to see if the compressor is cycling. Now, I'm gonna have to try and skip around a little bit with this because the charge has a lot to do with whether or not it's going to cycle or not, or whether or not you're going to have a good cooling. This gauge, something cheap you can get at any auto parts store, part of a charge kit, and normally you would have a bottle of refrigerant hooked up on this side so that you could force refrigerant into the system. But without the bottle on it, make sure it's closed. You can still get a good gauge reading. There are some like AC top-off kits that include a gauge, but I don't like the ones that don't have numbers on them, because then you can't tell really. It's just like, oh, green or red doesn't really help you a whole lot. When the engine's shut off, the pressure in the AC system should be somewhere, it's like 1.01 psi per degree Fahrenheit. I'm not exactly sure what the spec is. When it's not running, when the AC system is not running, like right now, the engine's off, so no circulation's happening. So static pressure, that means that this right now hooked up into the low side port reflects the pressure in the entire system. Properly charged, right now it's like 75 or 80 degrees outside. I would say this is probably a little bit overcharged, close to 90 psi. Now you're going to notice that this is in the red, but this is running pressure. Don't worry about it when you're looking at it for static pressure. When it's running pressure, we're going to take a look at that in a second. Then we're going to look for it in the green between like 32, like 28 to 50. Toyota likes to keep it between 35 and 45 on the low side, and it cycles depending on whether the clutch is engaged and how fast it's being used up in the evaporator. So that's really the first thing you should check if you think you have an AC problem, is check the pressure first. Because if you don't have enough pressure in the system, then none of the other things are going to work. Whether or not you've got a good electrical system, the clutch is fine, the belts are fine. No pressure, you're out of luck to begin with. So I like this gauge. It was something easy. This one just clicks on. You just this fitting. Make sure that when you're done, you put these caps back on, because that keeps dust from getting into this fitting, which will cause a leak. This one, you just stick it on, push it. Oops. Click it, and that's it. And then you can read the pressure. So I'm going to start the car and get the AC going and see what we come up with. Okay, now I don't have. Put some, get some fan going here, and I don't know what's going on. My cheap IKEA temperature gauge is telling me something wacky, like it's 104 degrees, which well, I guess it could make a little bit of sense, but I think it's still off. But anyway, I don't have the AC running yet. See, the AC button is not lit, so this is just blowing outside air. Make sure I got the temperature all the way down, and also fresh air, so I'm not recirculating. I'm going to turn the AC on and see what happens here. Give it a second. You can see immediately it's really starting to drop. It was reading 100 degrees before. Many times when we're doing AC diagnostics and looking at the functional aspect of it, we look for about a 30-degree drop in temperature and consider that to be a good temperature drop. And that at not even using recirculating, or in some cars it'll say max AC, which automatically turns on recirculation. You can see it's been about 30 seconds now, and we've already got closing in on a 20-degree drop. But yeah, so we'll leave it at that here. And so one of the things that we need to be checking, I've had complaints where, okay, the AC is blowing warm, as in it doesn't seem to be working at all. No cold air coming out at all. And in that case, a couple of things that you can check, aside from starting with the pressure check that we just talked about, is to make sure, again, go back to the gauge and make sure that it is in this range with the compressor running. Now, with the compressor engaged, that means what's happening is it is pulling low pressure on this side. Now, because I only have this one gauge, I can't really show you what's happening on the high side. The high side is probably upwards of 100 psi, because that's the pressure that it needs to force it through the evaporator. And then when it comes through on the evaporator, it goes to the condenser here in front of the radiator, and then back to the compressor. So right now it's in the green range. Personally, I'd like to see it a little bit lower, but it is functional. One of the other things, now if it's not working at all, you might notice that the compressor is not running, which, you know, I could simulate by pulling the relay. You have to remember that this is an electrical system as well as a refrigeration system. To run the compressor, you need the fuse that feeds the compressor. Here's this is the one little wire that gets its energy from the relay. So of course, you know, if you have an issue with wiring the fuse and relay box, obviously the compressor is not going to work. The part that I was mentioning before about pressure is that these systems require a minimum amount of pressure and a maximum amount of pressure to determine when to engage and disengage the clutch. Now, for example, we do have, sorry, I'm blocking it with my hand. We got one pressure sensor here on top of this receiver dryer filter assembly, which, yeah, the shade is horrible. Yeah, here. So this is the high side coming into it, and the evaporator is on the other side in the firewall and the air box. So you got that pressure sensor there. Some vehicles have a dual pressure sensor. They might have multiple pressure sensors. basically to turn it on and off at specific intervals of pressure. If you have too much in the system, now if this was up in the red, it would probably cycle very fast because it would build up pressure so much that it would shut it off before it had a chance to be effective inside the car. Other things that you can check, this would probably be something you notice audibly, that if you got belt slipping, or if the clutch is slipping. Now this clutch, if you listen to it, you'll hear that it kind of squeaks in and out. I'm going to engage it again. When that magnetic clutch pulls this shut, there's a little bit of slippage in there. And I mean, that's normal, it's the way it's supposed to operate. But if it gets worn out, it'll just keep slipping and it won't drive the compressor. Same thing with the belt. If the drive belt is getting worn out or if it's got oil on it, it'll slip. And you'll probably notice that as a squealing sound whenever you engage the AC, or maybe in the mornings when you start the car. You ever hear a car starting up and it's really squealy in the morning? That's one of the, it's usually what it is, something to do with the belt. So we're back inside here and taking a look at the temperature. I've gone down to 77, which isn't bad. Now, one final question that I've had is where AC seems to be warm on one side and cold on the other side. And that sometimes happens if you have enough refrigerant charge to run the AC, but not quite enough. So if you have a low, because if it's too low, it won't run at all. But if it's between that threshold of being too low and just enough, what'll happen is you'll have one side, it'll be ice cold on this side, and then over here on the right side, or opposite depending on the vehicle, it'll be warm, like as if the AC is not even running at all. And if you don't have a dual zone climate control system, that might be kind of weird, because what's happening is as the evaporator is receiving the refrigerant, it's absorbing all the heat on one side, and so that side gets cold. But by the time it gets over here, it's already being heated up inside the evaporator core, and so it can't absorb any more heat energy, so it comes out of this vent warm. And so again, checking the static pressure is a good idea, and check it against the repair manual for your vehicle, and that'll tell you if you have the right pressure in the system. If it's just a little bit too low, you end up with that weird problem where it's warm on one side and cool on the other. So let's see, final thing between checking pressure, checking the fuses and relays attached to the system up there for the clutch, for the electromagnetic clutch. Also the connectors that go to the pressure sensors, you'd have to check the repair manual. There could be one or two, possibly three sensors that detect the pressure in the system, and those determine when to engage the clutch on the compressor. And then finally, to be checking checking what's feeding your climate control system. Now in Serenity's case, this is pure analog. There's no digital stuff going on here. This is just a blend door between the heater core and fresh air. So sorry about that. The blend door, make sure that it's connected. If you feel very little resistance on it, this is like a cable operated blend door system. It might be in cold position, but if it's sucking heat from the heater core, then yeah, the AC is not going to be as effective. Making sure that the fan is working properly. There are some fan resistor packs that is basically like if you lose 1, 2, or 3, those resistors might be burned out, but 4 will work perfectly fine because it's a direct connection. Same thing with this is a vacuum operated blend system to determine which vents go where. But if that thing is going wacky, then you might have some issues with getting air to the right place, and so then it doesn't feel as you expect it to feel, because if you're expecting it to blow on your face and it's aiming it at the floor or wherever it broke last, then it won't feel correct to you. So that's about all I could think of to doing some checks on your own. Other than that, you probably have to get into a full-size air conditioning system recovery machine, such as you would see at your local auto repair shop, where they could do a more in-depth analysis of what the pressures are looking like on the high side and low side of the system, and diagnosing it from that. Final note: if you have